right, Bruce here, Targeted Wealth Creation. Let's get started. So what happened on today's trading? Good evening, by the way. So we closed down slightly in BITO, a little more than half of 1%, right? 0.65 of 1%. And the underlying, or sorry, that was in YBIT, and BITO, our tracking stock, right, where we buy calls, do synthetics, establish weeklies, that traded down 1.05% at 27.41. So sometimes people ask why. Well, it's because we write these weekly calls. Typically, just on our synthetics, they're mapped almost identical to BITO. So what BITO does, we do in our synthetic, more or less. Very close. The naked calls allow us to write calls and collect time decay premium. Okay, we do not want BITO to run past our weekly calls. Now that's excellent for the synthetic, but we only tend to cash out of those once a month or so, since they're written out about a month in time. But on the weeklies, we want to capture as much of that income. And typically, the fund managers and management of the fund companies decide how much they're going to pay out based on how much we collect on the weeklies. If we build up a lot in the synthetics, they'll use some of that additional money to pay us out. All right, let me tell you some good news that's happening, and I mentioned this. So in Barron's, and I just was looking at the ticker, so the Hong Kong ETF that had been rumored to start actually has now been trading for an hour or two, because it's already in Asia time with the time zone difference. They're typically 15 hours ahead, depends on which Asian country. 12 hours ahead of Eastern time and 15 hours ahead of West Coast time. So Hong Kong launched these, and they come 3 months after the US gave the green light to the ETFs pegged to Bitcoin spot price. So they both have, and these are the management companies, not that you guys care, but there's 6 funds. I think 3 BTCs and 3 Ethereum-based funds, and they're Bosera funds, China Asset Management Limited, and Harvest. And from what I understand, they're sort of buying down the management fee, so they're very low management fees, typically lower than what the US charges, although they're pretty low nowadays, as an incentive to get these going, and then I'm sure they'll raise them over time. So each company issued a spot Bitcoin and spot Ether ETF, which can be traded in both Hong Kong and US dollars. Okay. While China AMC also allowed it trading in Chinese yuan. Well, it's kind of interesting. Hong Kong can launch the funds. Mainland China's government still tells its citizens that they're not allowed to buy this. Now, it's sort of like education. I know some people that teach in China or teach online to China, and that's not supposed to happen. So I imagine you're going to get Chinese money in these, but it's not the same as if the Chinese government blessed it, right? So money is still going to flow. As a matter of fact, some of the issuers said they expect to get 200 to 300 million in the first day and exceed what the US got in their first ETF launch. Now, collectively, with all of the BlackRock and Fidelity ETFs and all the ProShares Bitcoin, the US has a lot more money. They're sort of the world's leader in how much goes into the Bitcoin ETFs and crypto ETFs. Now, it's expected, though, that these are going to do well in Asia, and they'll draw in money from other parts from the Middle East. They'll draw money in from all over Asia. So these are expected to do really well. And that, in turn, encourages the launch. Like Singapore may say, well, we want a fund, right? And so it's all good when you're long a YBIT for dividend income strategy, or whether you're long directly BITO. I own both of those, BITO and YBIT. So that's the situation there. Let's get into the fund. So again, I explained to you guys that it's like a derivative of a derivative. So I wish that I could get my accounting together here and understand. So I just show you this so you understand. Because the BITO people that actually own BITO are all excited because tomorrow, I think, is ex-dividend day, sort of what in the YieldMax world we call declaration day. So ProShares tomorrow on the 30th is ex-dividend, and I think that's when they announce what they're going to pay, right, in this fund. But what YBIT does is they buy options, and I'll talk all about that, and I have that dialed in because I've been doing YieldMax funds for a while. I completely understand everything YieldMax does. But knowing that since they're doing options on BITO, what is BITO doing so that it succeeds? Well, generally speaking, you want Bitcoin futures to go up because that's what they're buying, right? They're buying this K4, which is the May 31 long 3,776 futures contracts. But I do notice, since I get end of day things, that I see that they've been selling some of the June futures, right? And eventually, when they get around May 28 or May 29, they'll roll these into June, and then maybe select a few Julys. Because if you look at the balance right now, 52% of their holdings of BITO are in the May futures, which is what they call the current month, right? So you're going to pay more for June futures because you have a longer period of time to ride that. You're sort of paying for the time. But the fact that they buy and sell some of these, they may be generating some cash there. So I can't totally tell. And this is all their collateral. This is all their treasury bill. So they spent for 1.4 billion. And it's worth 1.398. It kind of works the same as treasury bills. They label it a full treasury amount, and then you accrue interest toward the expiration or the full collection of the amount. So that helps with some cash flow for them. But I think they're getting ready for their distribution, right, where tomorrow's the ex-dividend date. And I forget when they distribute. Oh, actually, they distribute on May 8th. And that's the same date that YBIT would be distributing. However, they're not distributing in this May month because YBIT only started trading on April 23. Just not enough time to have enough cash to pay out. Okay, so we did our 1.05 drop in BITO, and we only went down, about half that amount, maybe 60% of that amount. So let's take a look at cash. No new shares added, right? We had gone from 125,000, we jumped to 225,000 and went to 250. Now remember, they don't report shares less than in 25,000. They call those a creation unit in YieldMax. So you're not going to see that until we get to 275 or we drop to 225 or more, right? So the only purpose of tracking the cash, and I'm able to get all the details here, there were no trades, so they didn't put on any additional calls or any additional synthetics. And so the only change here was some of the movement of money. You can see here that this bucket went up, right? And this bucket went down. So they took some cash and simply moved it into the First American, which I understand is one of the higher yielding. It's called a First American Government. It's like a money market fund. So let's get over to our weeklies and see how we're doing there. So on our weeklies, I had sort of questioned writing a 28, but so far the fund managers know more than I know, right? This is our chart. I didn't update it, but you can just look at it, right? We went from 27, I think 90 something to 27.70 on Friday, and then on Monday we closed at 27.41. So typically every 2 to 5 days I'll update this. If there's any big movement or any big volume, then I definitely will update the chart for that particular day. And the same thing is going with the underlying Bitcoin, as you'd expect. It's pretty closely mapped because those futures, every future contract that they buy is equivalent to 5 Bitcoins, right? So they've got a lot of money in this thing. BitO is a big fund, right? So the fact that they're writing calls and writing these options and puts, if they wouldn't have chosen it if it wasn't substantially liquid. So it's got massive liquidity. So that's positive, which is a requirement for YieldMax to really do any of that. So when we look at holdings, this is nothing more than kind of a repeat. Make this 0, turn my arrow sideways, right? So we didn't do anything. We stayed at 250. Assets didn't change a lot. So this, oh, sorry, my Excel went into a delay here, so I need to update this to its current price. I'll give this a second. Sometimes it just glitches. So the other thing, we did go down while I'm waiting on this. So in our synthetic, even though we didn't do anything, the lower we trade, the more liability we have when we buy that out to take a loss. But since it's not till 517, it's really no big deal, right? Maybe that is the current price. Yeah, that is the current price, sorry. So on the holdings, and what they're really saying here is you add up all of the net assets and you take the share count and you divide, and they're saying fair value is 1989. We're trading at 1980, so you could argue that we've got a 9-cent discount, right? So what I was talking about here, this is the 403,000 when you go out and look at the synthetic, right? So we haven't done anything since 426, but what happens when BitO goes down, right, in the price? So it went down from 27.70 to 27.41, and it's on a 29 strike, but it doesn't expire till 517. So I don't typically worry about those, and it's not a real loss, it's a paper or book loss, right? We're actually making gains when we write these calls. So we're counting this income, but we're not counting the potential loss. But it wouldn't have mattered if all of a sudden we ran up to 30 here and we had a big gain. We wouldn't be able to count that gain until we sold, right? So this is really a paper loss, and these count as real because we sold the call, or sorry, we bought the call and sold the put. Okay, so back to holdings. So when we look across, this is where you see that 403,000, right? So here's our synthetic, and I update the value at the end of the day, right? So when we go up, the call increases and the put decreases. When we go down, then the put increases and the call decreases, right? So ultimately you want to win on your synthetics, but where we really want to win, and we're going along, is these weeklies. So this is where I was about to go over the detail. So I was concerned that they wrote last Friday 1,050 at 28, right? Because we were trading at 27.70, but so far with 1 day in, we're doing okay, right? And we also have 720 that we had written last Thursday, and those are 4% out of the money, and these are 2%. So let me go show you those in terms of how they're actually making money right now. So we'll go to our April tab, and you can look at those, and then I'll go over to holdings. So we're in a situation where we sold at 28. Okay, actually, I think this one's a 28.5 and not a 29. 29 is our synthetic. didn't change the money we got for it. So we got 49 cents and 45 cents, right? So collectively, we collected 35,000 and 47,000. So we're showing that as income, right? Our short call income. And YieldMax uses that income to determine its payout ratio along with the IV, right? And our IV actually dropped if you go back and look at our weekly. And the IV is all about volatility, implied volatility. It went from 62 to 59. So when we stay in a fairly tight trading range, that's deemed not very volatile. You want to see this thing go from 27 to 29 to 32 back to 30 and things like that, and create that volatility. It's been as low as 21, but it's also been as high as 108. So understand that volatility is your friend. That creates the premiums, and that's how YieldMax tends to pick stocks. Although when you get in an Amazon and an Apple and a Google, although Google really flew and sort of unexpectedly produced, and even Tesla, right, which had been falling, and all of a sudden flew up, that helps the IV go up. So you can see here, this is the pricing range, right, for BITO. YBIT doesn't have one really to speak of, right, because on the opening day or on the second day it went as low as 1977. And I probably need to update this to see if it's dropped below on the chart, right? But just understand, this is a very short history. This has got a, several year history. So this is more accurate. We all know that 33 is the height of BITO, right? All right, so you understand that part. No volume, I checked today, right? The same kind of volume. So we wanted to break out to the upside on volume. And this thing could trade all, honestly, 3-4 weeks. You just don't want to see it break this lower scenario, right? And it's all Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't want to break 60,000. We don't want it to close a couple of days below 60,000 in BTC, because that brings in 52,000 as a possible dropping point, right? But hey, when you're in something that can move 100%, 200%, sometimes you expect this volatility. So, time your buys so that you don't buy all that you want to buy at one point. If you're looking at YBIT and you bought a little bit and you're going, should I buy here? I'd just wait this. Wait till we break through 29 and through 30 and then jump in, because we're probably going to run up to 33, pull back to 31, and the next thing you know, we're at 35, right? So you get a confirmed bull run just like on a breakdown. I don't know what it translates into YBIT, but my guess would be if we broke down here, we could see 16 on YBIT, maybe mid 15s. But it likely, when you look at everything else, would end up being a fabulous buy. But the guy who bought all of his stuff at 2045 or something, they're frustrated, right? So remember, try and do direct cost averages, right, by buying in at different times. Yes, it's a fabulous yield, right, or will be a fabulous yield when we get it. So that reminds me, that's the final piece. So here, nothing changed. We're still looking. In a normal month, this would be what they base their distribution on. So you could pretty much be assured you'd get 48 to 50 cents, because you have $1.41, right? So you have like 93 cents in this value, and you have 48 cents, and collectively they have $1.40. Even though these are negative numbers, they're positive earnings. It's just the debit credit rule in accounting, so don't get hung up on that. So remember, we're going to have weeks and weeks and weeks of this before we have a June declaration, right? Which is, I think, around June 3rd. I'll show it as we get closer. All the YieldMax single stock funds all have the same day. And in May, declaration day is May 3rd, and payday is May 8th. Okay, guys, that's all I got for you today. Good evening, and again, this is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. This is for fun and education. See ya. Bye.